welcome to the GDD podcast. This is episode 49. And this week we have a very special guest. We have Linus Scheffel, weapons artist, a senior weapons artist with War Dog, and you also freelance as a weapons artist. How are we doing, Gro?
Yep, I'm on.
You good?
All right, You're gonna have to do it again.
Yeah, you're on.
I didn't hear you actually say it to me.
No, sorry, dude. Yeah, how we doing, dude?
I'm doing good.
Man, so we had your I don't want to call him boss, but like War Dog lead on last week.
Yeah.
And actually we got Dory on next week, so it's like a War Dog few weeks.
So it'll be a theme to it then.
Yeah, man. So it's interesting because, like, obviously, earlier as a weapons artist, you're a weapons artist. I had so I wanted to ask you a question because I saw an interesting topic come up in Discord today. Someone was asking, should I go into character art and environment art, and their sort of justification was, with character artists, like the jobs are scarcer, so maybe there's more availability in environment art.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I wonder actually, I imagine there's probably quite a lot of weapons artists who share a similar mindset of, I can't go into weapon art, I've got to go into props or environment because there's no jobs out there for weapons artists. Have you yourself come into that?
The thing when I wanted to do 3D, I didn't actually know what to do, so I actually just referred to one of my main interests in everyday life. I go shooting with my dad, etc., and I'm a big fanatic of weapons. Who would have thought, huh? So I actually just I started out doing 3D, doing vehicles and similar things. I thought that was a lot of fun at the time, but then I realized that I could get more into the actual weapons part of the 3D business, so to speak. And then it just caught on because that's what I really like look at when I'm during my free time. I like to look at a lot of documentaries and stuff like that, and weapons, how they actually work, how they mechanically function and stuff like that really like interests me. So I just got really interested in the whole of it when I realized you could do that for a living, just like that one niche of 3D. I didn't really think about what the competitive side of it would be, how many slots of jobs and stuff it would be. I just followed what I felt like I wanted to do at the time, and it worked out. I happened to live in the same city as Dice, so I had a bit of a good shot there. Knew some people there, and started at a school called Future Games here in Stockholm, where the main thing that you get there is the contacts. A lot of people from studios nearby. We have like the most studios in like the world in our city, and people from all over come to our school, and they just do different types of lectures and stuff. And then you meet people from Dice, and you can then talk to them like, I really want to do weapons and stuff, and they're like, hey, you should try this and you should try that. Also perfect for the feedback aspect of it. Like you get to know what is the most important parts of the thing. So a lot of that came from one person at Dice that I was speaking to regularly, and he said, oh, you should focus on this and that. And then came an offer from Ubisoft during my first year there. Um, and then I thought I either go, and Ubisoft was in Barcelona. That's one of the key things. So that's when I thought that I should either. I've always My dream was always to go to Dice. So I thought that right now I either go to Barcelona or I make like take a shot at Dice. So I went to Dice and I said, hey. You can either hire me right now or I'm going to Barcelona. That's basically like how it went down. And then I get to meet with their lead weapons artist, who spent about 30 minutes of just picking out the like pulling up on the projector things that I really liked about my top pieces at the time, and then he just destroyed them. And but feedback has always been like the main thing for me. I always want the feedback because I don't see any other way of getting better. Just grinding and grinding without anybody taking a look at it, you're just gonna producing the end up producing the same thing over and over.
So, what was the when you said you were getting feedback from a very early stage from the dice guys,
Mm.
and you picked up on stuff that people are looking for. What was the sort of common messages you're getting back as feedback from the dice guys in particular?
They were very specific.
Okay.
It was not very general things. It would mostly be like just focus on the roughness. It would be things like that, like very specific productions
Yeah.
things. Like I wouldn't focus on roughness as much, and then they would say, "Oh, you really need to focus on roughness because roughness really levels up all assets so much if you properly use that." So
So
that was the
you
main
were
thing.
like, so there's a reputation with dice that everything's photogrammetry.
Mm,
I'm assuming then with dice, with your time there, you as a weapons artist, you were actually making the assets. You weren't just photo scanning some gun and that was it. That's what you used. You just
yeah.
modeled everything from scratch, I imagine.
Uh,
Because there's a bit of like a stigma at the moment there. Like people think of dice or Battlefield in general, and like yeah, everything's photogrammetry.
yeah.
Um, so how did the weapon pipeline actually look like?
Um, I don't know exactly how much, if there's anything regarding where what we can say and not.
Yeah,
So that I'm gonna,
play it safe.
yeah, I'm gonna play it safe. Yeah. Uh, First, the grammetry stuff. It only applies to materials.
Hmm.
Not as much for metals and stuff like that. It's mostly just maybe wood and dirt and stuff like that. And then it's vegetation and environment. That's like the scanning subject of all
Yeah.
things. Weapons, we don't scan anything. We model everything from scratch. Using references, of course. For uh, was it? Yeah, for this for the latest Battlefield 5, I think we did scanned materials that we use as tileables onto different surfaces that are masked. So, like the
Hmm.
stock would be wood, and everything else is made of metal, and etc. Then to produce it's been a while. I don't exactly remember how we did it. We
Nah,
and
it's cool.
then
It's cool.
different UVs. One is obviously the details or the normals and stuff. So that one is uniquely mapped, etc. Then there's another, like many studios do this. I assume they do the map number two. The UV2 is different UVs altogether to map the camos or whatever you have, etc., on the gun, so that the tiling camo doesn't tear along the edges where you have seams on the UVs, etc. Instead, they would be almost like if you created the gun in one UV island per side. That's how you could think about it. There's one just facing each other, and then the camo would be projected onto that, and it would wrap around the entire gun without seams, etc. That
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I've got actually. I wanted to pick your brain, so I was going to ask talk to Ola about this last week, but we ended up we spent a lot of time on War Dog.
mm,
So I kind of pre warned you about this. I have a natural what's the word disliking, I suppose is the best way I can describe it, to the Soviet grade weapons. You know, the
mm,
AKs, the SVDs, the Dragunovs.
mm,
Um, and my mind changed. Rick Greaves showed me an artist, so I've started playing Escape to Tarkov,
yeah.
and he showed me Vadim's work. I can't. I'm not even going to attempt his second name because
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
going to end up butchering it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just curious what like as a weapons artist when you look at this, because me as an ignorant person, because I'm like a materials environment artist,
mm,
I looked at these weapons and I was blown away because I was like, oh wow, I actually like these. They're all Soviet, AKs and all these kinds of variations,
mm,
and I was like, I like every single one of these, which is rare for me because normally I find these weapons just dull to look at.
mm.
Um, do you like? A, have you seen them and do you have any thoughts on them? And B, how do like weapon artists look at other other people's assets, because as a materials artist, a lot of the stuff I grade another materials artist on is like, if I can look at your work and reverse engineer it, for example,
Mm,
and I can see how you did stuff, I'm normally like, okay, I'm not so big on it. I mean, take out the artistic just merit of it.
mm,
But there's certain things I look at when I'm looking at other material artists' work. Same for environment artists.
mm.
Do you guys like when you look at other people's weapons? What are you looking at? What is it that catches your eye? What is it that intrigues you? Because I mean, I look at this stuff, and the bit that grabs me
Yeah,
is the grunge and the variation on the wood and the way they've done the wear on the metal.
yeah.
Catches my eye. So, what do you, as a weapons artist, like look at when you see
Uh,
this stuff?
so when I look at other people's stuff, it would be, yeah, Tarkov stuff also definitely. Is I look mainly at like one thing, and that's the definition of the material, that
Mm-hmm.
how well replicated that is, how difficult it would be to make that material yourself, how you would do it, etc. Modeling doesn't really interest me that much. It's mostly how well represented the textures are. So,
Yeah.
like for Tarkov, they're perfect. Some of them I look at them and I go, I have no idea how to replicate that. And then you start to wonder uh, how they made it, in which workflows, etc. I mean, yeah, exactly. For the Tarkov, bring up a Tarkov piece right here. I thinking that there's so many details on that I think you would need that thing in front of you, in order to be able to also come up with stuff that you
Yeah.
can actually just get on there. I mean, you would need a so crazy amount of references, of just finding pictures online to in order to get that. I'm pretty sure that Tarkov weapon artists also have some weapons in front of them actually,
Yeah, I think they
like,
do.
yeah, and that is incredibly helpful, of course. You get a lot of inspiration from that things from a different weapon that you could put on the weapon you're currently working on, etc., and stuff like that.
But so it's something that's always bugged me. I don't understand this, and you might be able to help me out here. Why aren't you guys also doing like hero props? You know what I mean? Because your mod, all the principle. It's not like material art and prop art where like there is a clear definition. You're doing completely different things.
Mm,
I'm in substance designer for one, and the other I'm in like
mm,
modeling package and substance painter.
mm,
You're doing the exact same thing. You're literally in the modeling package and then the texturing package, and you're baking and you're doing all this stuff.
mm,
Why why do weapon artists, and I'm probably thinking more from a studio point of view,
mm,
why are you guys only doing weapons? If you're the like, the elite of modeling and texturing,
mm.
surely you guys should be dabbling more in also props
Yeah.
just to allow you to have more work. Like, do you guys do that and it just doesn't go in a portfolio? Like, what's the crack with that?
So, from us, like, for a personal point of view, it's just interest.
Mm-hmm.
And from a freelancing point of view, I do other stuff too. I'll do
Okay.
whatever somebody wants modeled and textured, as long as it's within my realm, so to speak. It's not a sculpted character, etc. Then I wouldn't even know what to do. But as long as it's like modeled regularly with either booleans or with just sub-D modeling, it's fine. I'll do anything. It doesn't really matter.
Does
Uh,
that transition across well, like the majority of weapons artists, or do you think you're in the minority there?
Um, I don't know. I'd say that most people that uh, do weapons as well, if they were freelancing, I'm pretty sure they would do a tank, for example, if they got the option to do that. Like, or anything similar. Let's say that they were also asked to make a stove from the 50s. Like, I'm pretty sure they'd make that too, as long as
Do you reckon you'd
it's a paying thing.
do you think you'd from a personal point of view,
Mm,
I mean, a tank
mm,
is being so big,
mm,
a lot of the details are broad.
mm.
Do you prefer like the sort of the focus that you get with a weapon? Because with a weapon, you can get right in on the details and get really personal with it.
That's one
Whereas when
of
you do
the things.
a tank's huge. Like you have to think big, so you can't get into the nitty gritty details. Is that
Exactly.
why you like the weapons?
That is one of the major things why I like weapons. They're so close. It's a small thing that you put a lot of love into. The smaller
Mm.
the weapon, it's like the more the fun it is. That's why I do a lot of pistols. I like pistols. Pistols are my favorite. Pistols
Really,
and
they're your favorite?
snipers. Yeah, pistols and snipers. Just
Is
because
that why you turned a Spaz 12 into into a sniper rifle?
maybe,
but
maybe. And that's why it's got
I'd say
steel
this,
slugs too.
but this is what I wanted to get into. Do you think because of your knowledge and understanding of weapons, like if you so as a I understand that they're slugs, so therefore the scope does make sense. But to the person who doesn't understand what a slug is, for example, with a shotgun, and they look at this and they go, "That's fucking that's weird. Like,
Yeah,
why is your experience as a person who actually handles his guns as well and is actually interested in the guns allows you to do these funky things,
yeah,
and it still looks right. Like it. I mean, that gun works in real life. Like, so you the fact that you know that you've made sure it looks like it works. Because I think even a novice like could look at this and go, okay, it makes some sort of sense. Like, it just looks
yeah.
right.
If you don't know what a
Does
slug
that
is,
play a
that
part?
would make a lot less sense, indeed. That would be. It's also one of the things that we do. Me and a bunch of friends used to play a lot of BF3, and
Mm-hmm.
when you play on some of the community servers, and you want to play as a sniper, but you can't play as a sniper. I always play as a sniper if I can. I mean, in every game where there's a sniper, I'm gonna use it, right? And then in some of the servers of BF3, there's gonna be a sniper limit. So what you do is you take a shotgun and you equip it with slugs and an optic instead, and bam, you can play as a sniper, but you're not a sniper. So that's
Oh,
one of
the
the
game has done
little
that
things.
recently.
Yeah, one of the little fun
So,
details about that project was it's sort of what we used to do in Battlefield.
so what's the right now? What's your favorite thing to make? If you had to pick something like, and then not just sniper in general, because like I mean, you've got three snipers, for I can see on your port.
Mm,
Well, if you class the Spaz 12, you got like a wooden Soviet one. You got this really American, big, bulky anti-tank, sniper. Then you got like the beige, like polymer, I guess,
hmm.
sniper. Like what sort of things are like grabbing you right now? What's your personal interest going towards right now?
It's in the beginning I did a lot of uh, antique stuff, World War stuff,
Mm-hmm.
bare metal stuff, basically. Right now, my interests are modern materials, so it would be polymer and all these types of cerakotes and stuff. I think they're very interesting to work with and lots of fun. So right now, it's mostly it depends a lot on what the weapon is made of, rather than
Yeah,
exactly what it is. It could be a funky SMG or whatever, but what it's made of makes the most difference to me, so to speak. Uh,
I'm liking the presentation as well, man. Like your recent one, the at 11, like the wooden base, like putting the gun down on like in it's in a world at that point.
mm,
I find that stuff really interesting because I was thinking about this. Like, yeah, presentation's huge for me. I recently saw an artist who did the weapons for Hunt Showdown,
mm,
um, and all I got hung up on was just the presentation. Like, ignore the prop. Like, he just laid it out in such a way where, like, so for example, there's a gun. The classic shot of the guns, like you're looking head down at them, and they're mirrored back to back.
yep.
He did that, but there's like they're off to a perspective, and there's some shadows and some lighting, and he just presented it in such an artistic way.
Mm,
And then that got me thinking more about presentation and like how you could present guns. Like people sometimes when they make like knives or battle axes, they put them inside like containers, like the actual weapons containers they come in,
yeah.
or stuff like that. How much of that sort of stuff do you think about when you're presenting your weapons? Because I was talking to I think it's Rick about it. I was like, I can imagine like a bullpup combat shotgun
Mm,
in environment, you have it like a weapons locker where it's open and like it's lent up in there or
yeah.
like hoisted and you got showers and stuff. How much do you think about that? Because you've had to so with a weapon you're spending like however long, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months on a weapon.
Mm,
It's a bit of a slog. It's you get to the end of it.
mm.
How much do you think about or want to invest time into then doing the presentation? Because the presentation, like you could do an extra almost month worth of work if you wanted to
I mean,
on
yeah,
presenting and building stuff for it.
you could definitely sit and just poke around in the presentation forever. Um, I usually like if you look at most of my projects, I used to do it in the one way in the beginning, and then it's like different depending on what project it is. Uh,
Yeah.
until I ended up with black backgrounds and lots of rim lights. Really, I like the it's like a product that you're gonna purchase. It's like, oh, there's shapes here and there's shapes there and etc. But in my latest one, the one the L1 L11 that you talked about with the wood, for that
Mhm.
one, I put it down and I was gonna do an effect about something, like a plane that's behind it, and then I swapped it out with a material that was the wrong material, and then I'm like, hey, I could put a material on this, and then I put it to wood, and I'm like, hey, this kind of looks like it's on wood, I suppose. And then I went with wood on that, and then and the first ones or the second picture where they're side by side,
Mhm.
I just placed them out like that, and I have a static camera like that when I texture, so it updates whenever I export the textures and I look.
Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah, you've got the cameras there, and you're seeing them in the final presentation pose,
yeah,
how the textures
exactly.
are reading.
Yeah, and then sometimes I have an FPS camera as well. If if I want to look at things how they would look in the first person, like for an actual asset for a game, for example, it's pretty good to do that.
Yeah.
But here I ended up the presentation is actually the same as the usual stuff. I just put it the way it is, and then I tried a few different angles, and I couldn't find anything I liked after the wood picture. That is,
Mhm.
and I'm like, hey, I mean, it's just about the gun, so I just put in a bunch of lighting in the texture preview scene, and it ended up with that. I mean, it could be simple, it could be, like you said, pretty complex, having it in maybe an environment or something similar. Um, but like you also mentioned, after you put X amount of time into this thing, you get tired of it. And I think from when I finished it, it took me a bunch of time before I actually took the pictures. And I'm like, oh, right, I should take the pictures of this thing. And then you just end up, and I'm starting three different other projects during that time, and then you're like, you're gonna rush it in the end, so you start
You
doing
ever
stuff.
consider collaborating?
Mm,
Like, do you ever consider collaborating? So, for example, with my safe house scene, I'm not a weapons artist by any stretch, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make a subpar weapon for my environment. My environment needed a weapon to tell the story that I was trying to tell.
mm,
So I collaborated. I was like, hey, I reached out to an anchor who did some really nice like Metro style AKs.
mm,
And I was like, hey, do you want to collaborate? And I'll put the weapons in my scene. Obviously, I credit you.
mm,
Do you ever consider that for your weapon showcases? Like, okay, I don't want to make. I spent all my time making a weapon. I don't want to then have to spend the same amount of time making an environment for the weapon. Have you ever considered that? Just finding an environment artist or somebody to like collaborate with on this?
I I'm not personally a fan of being presented in a big environment, or maybe in
Hmm.
something that catches too much of your eye.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, this is a gun. You're supposed to look at the gun and just the gun. But I'm also doing some other collab stuff. I'm doing collab with some people from Dice where I worked, and he's also a weapon artist actually, but he has a lot of other interests as well, and he's making a character right now, and he's been
Really?
hiding. He's like, "Oh, I'm not good at sculpting, but Salvo, you're super good at sculpting, so don't stop saying that, man." And then he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna make a character," and I said, "That character needs a gun."
I
And
like that.
then so we're gonna do collab for that. He's starting the character. Yeah, well, he's already started the character, uh, and we'll see how long that takes to get that set up, and maybe we could show some of that. It would be pretty cool. It's
I like that stuff, man. I like seeing artists work together.
yeah, and then we're thinking of like maybe. I mean, it will also be one of those projects where you're probably not gonna look at the gun when you see the full character, etc. But maybe some cool shots that I could use when I'm presenting the gun, where maybe
Hmm.
it's just the torso and the face, and he's holding the weapon or whatever, stuff like
Arms for the
that.
first person
And
shot.
if I were to present it in something else, it would either be in a black case, like you said, like in a weapons case itself, but the case wouldn't be in an environment. It would be a case and then the rifle, like, or whatever weapon it is on top inside of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you look at, it's more of a package then rather than what is actually included in the project sort of thing. Because otherwise
makes
it's
sense.
like I've made an armory, but I'm like it's just the gun really. But people look at the armory instead, and it goes, it's not really what
Yeah,
I want. But a
yeah, that's fair
character,
enough. It's just an interesting idea.
yeah, but a character holding a weapon, I really dig that stuff. So that's pretty cool. Lot kind of difficult to get a character artist though to actually
Yeah,
want to make a character just out of like
yeah, they're
that.
a busy
It's
bunch.
yeah.
So there's one thing as well. Like, so I don't know. Actually, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, and please answer honestly. I don't. I'm not gonna be upset. Have you listened to the one we did last week with Ole?
With Ole,
Yeah.
no, I have not.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's
No,
fine.
no.
So, we had an interesting chat. So he's on like kind of where I come from, where I don't mind sacrificing what I deem realism for the sake of aesthetics.
Mm, mm,
Adding details which necessarily don't make 100% of sense, but they look cool and they help compositionally.
yeah.
I feel like just from talking, you're on the other side of things because you handle guns and you care a lot about the detail and realism.
Mm.
Is that where you come from? Like, if it's not absolutely, makes sense world wise, you're kind of like, it doesn't feel right to me. Is that
Um,
fair to say?
yeah, I'd say I'm mostly interested in realistic stuff, things that would work. Uh, if I see like concepts, I'm always like, oh, I should make a gun from a concept. But then I look at the concept, I'm like, that wouldn't work though. And then I end up not doing it and stuff like that. And then I find a modern gun
Hmm.
with the materials that I want, and then I end up doing that instead. And it some I get sort of hooked up on these modern weapons right now. Yeah.
So is that why you haven't? I'm guessing that's why you haven't dabbled too much in the whole sci-fi realm of stuff because it's hard to find a reference for that. You've got to like just go almost wing it.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Usually, a reference of that type of thing comes, and it's like two pictures, and I'm honestly not creative enough to come up with, oh, this gun totally looks like that over here, and then just make up some
Hmm.
stuff there that would work. But yeah, it don't. So, I mean, I like working from existing stuff, and I'm personally just not a fan of sci-fi stuff.
Hmm.
I find it kind of meh. Um, I really dig just materials that look good, and then it's not that much about the gun itself. It's mostly about how realistic the gun can get, sort of.
Do you get frustrated though when you see? So this is something I've said a few times that working in games,
Mm,
it gets frustrating.
mm,
When you see good art that gets dumbed down and quote optimized,
mm,
and I look at like say for example your recent sniper rifle. I'm like
mm,
that looks amazing. I love this, and it's
yeah,
like, but when you get to the game asset, it's like it probably looks about 30% worse. Textures get compressed,
yeah,
mapped, LODs, and it's like, oh, okay, this amazing piece of art has now been tarnished.
yeah.
Um, as an artist, is that something that comes into your mind when you're working? Because I know that it's something that's been bugging me a lot recently, and I don't know whether it's because of the lead stuff with Deco,
Mm,
where I'm seeing great art, and then it's like, oh, well, actually, we've got a poly counter word too, or like them textures need to be like less draw cool, so we've got to like
mm.
dumb this down a little bit.
Um,
Does that play on your mind at all?
I suppose not that much. It's if I make something that I think looks really good, and then somebody says, "Oh, we're gonna have to bring it down," I'll just mostly go, "Okay." I don't really mind. Whenever I'm taking the picture of it later, I'll just
Yeah.
up the rest again, and I'll be like, "Hey, this is what I made, but not what we brought it down to be in the game or whatever." Um, for the sniper that you mentioned, that one's very high res. Since I just thought whenever I'm making personal stuff anymore, I don't care about opting stuff or whatever. So I'll just, oh, I want to make something that looks good, and I'll make something that I think looks good.
It's
For
actually
the
that's
the
sorry. I just want to interrupt you. Sorry, there's
Mhm.
one thing I wanted to I wanted to just talk about for a sec, and this is I had this conversation. I've had this conversation a lot recently, and we're talking about like optimization in portfolios.
Yeah.
Um, and I basically came from the point of view of it's I wouldn't really care about optimization in your portfolio. Like obviously use real time tech
Mm.
and real time. Don't don't
That
just take
that's the
like
line right
poly
there.
paint.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
should be not be paint over or anything like that. I think.
but so I've had some people agree, some people disagree. I'm sort of curious what your thoughts are. You know, do you even care when you're looking at a portfolio? Are you looking at like, oh, what's the try count though, or like how many textures do you use? Like, yeah, how
I
are they
mean,
4K textures? Oh, well, they don't count.
the example for me is would be Tarkov. Like their presentation, the shots of their weapons that they have presented is not exactly matching what you see in the game. But
Hmm.
there's so many things that like affects it. Of course, when they posted the images and such, they are super high res, etc. But I don't really mind in game. For example, like lighting does it's everything. So if
Yeah,
no matter how good of a thing you made, if the lighting is kind of meh, it's gonna look pretty meh. So but when I look at him here, he's like he's presented them to their full potential, and then I of course he upresses them or whatever to make them look to their full potential, etc. Of what he's actually made. And when I look at that, that's all I see. I go, you've made something that looks incredible, and then I just go from there. I think, how did you define these materials, etc. I don't think about, oh, but this is so high res, blah blah blah. That's not really what I'm concerned about because I know that the gun is gonna be scaled down. It's not gonna look as good in the game as it does on a portfolio render, of course. But instead, I just look at the things that I'm interested in, which, like we mentioned earlier, is the materials. I just get drawn to materials pretty fast.
I think that's going to help a lot of people to hear that because, like I said, I've had this conversation quite a lot, and it's a lot with when I'm mentoring students or I'm doing talks, and it's like, oh yeah, but I show so like for example, we're talking about wireframes,
Mm,
and they're like, oh, should I show my wireframe? And I was like, no, probably not. Like the
yeah,
fact is, you're almost inviting me to critique your work
yeah,
past what I need to. Unless you've got the most amazing looking asset that's absolutely incredible,
mm,
and it's got an absolutely incredible wireframe where it's like super low poly, even though it looks high poly, then yeah, flex and show your wireframe.
yeah,
But it's a double edged sword because I'm like, I've seen people post really great work, and then I see the wireframe, and then I'm spending more time critiquing
yeah,
their edge loops than I am looking at their art. And I kind of I feel like don't get hung up on like when they're doing portfolio work, tying yourself in a knot in optimizations and stuff like that.
yeah,
Just make the best piece of art you can make within reason, obviously.
yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and yeah, I just think it's useful for people to hear that because, especially from you as well, like it's great art. You obviously spend a lot of time looking at weapon art, working with weapon artists. Hearing that is probably going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, like in the beginning, you can if somebody looks at my art station, they'll notice I posted wireframes and unlike everything in the beginning.
Hmm.
That is because, of course, it was more of I can make an asset. Look, this is an asset rather than look at how cool the art is. It's
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
it's like oh, this thing. People would otherwise go, oh, but you can't use this. But like you're like, oh, this look at the wireframe. You can actually use this thing and etc. But once you get like past that point where people like after I don't know 1 or 2 projects, if you post the wireframes, people are gonna know, yeah, okay, you can make the assets and they actually work. But then they start to look at the art itself, and I just started or I stopped posting wireframes. I'm like, nobody's interested in that anymore."
But is that actually accurate though? Like when you say, "No, but look, I can make an asset."
Mm,
To a student, say like who's coming out of university,
mm,
they I still don't think they you need to post a wireframe.
no.
Um, I get that you have to jump through a few hoops. You have to show skills. I can texture multiple types of surfaces. I can do grunge, whatever it might be.
Mm,
But the wireframe stuff, I'm like, nah, like I don't need to see that. Like, because also every studio handles optimization in very different ways.
mm,
Um, some are like, yeah, texture it in the highest res you can, and we'll just downscale an engine, like,
mm,
or there's a bunch of different ways they can do it. And I'm kind of like, yeah, you could waste your time, like, because that also burns you out. I feel like, the optimization side of stuff.
yeah.
it's a very energy consuming thing.
Yeah, it takes a lot
So
of
it's
time,
like,
depending on how
yeah,
good they want it, of course.
yeah. So it's good. You can have like all this motivation to do a project. So you get to the optimization stage, and you're just like, ugh,
Yeah,
I don't want to work on this anymore.
yeah.
And you can
That's
kill the project.
one of the things that's really important about portfolio pieces. Like, try to do eliminate as much boring work as possible. Some like the sniper again, the L11. I don't opt that. I mean, there are areas where you can reduce poly count, etc. But it just takes a lot of time, and that's something you don't want to do, and it's gonna end up
Hmm.
on what we call the shelf or in the project graveyard. Sick
Yeah.
reference there, yeah. And things that go into the graveyard or ends up on the shelf, they're not coming back. So you're gonna put so much time on that thing, and then you're gonna be like, oh, but it's not opted, and I gotta opt it, but I don't want to do that now. So you don't progress that thing, and it just gets forgotten. And then yeah, I've got like, I don't know, 12 projects on the shelf that at first I was like, oh, I should opt this, and no, no, not really. So maybe like 5 projects ago, I just stopped doing that. Except for one thing, I do opt UVs a lot.
Oh yeah,
I'm
but that's so you can get nicer textures, right?
Yeah, but not only that, it also saves more time. Where things can be mirrored, you should mirror those. Not like invisible areas, just with like, oh, this can literally be mirrored, but then you would see it. Like things that you wouldn't see, etc. Because lots of my wear and tear, you do like manual painting, and if the lesser like the fewer surfaces that you have to paint, the more energy you can put on those, and then you get
Yeah.
the same result. So you would end up painting one surface and it gets ends up on two. You've saved like half the work already, so you wouldn't have to paint the other side in its own unique way or etc. So that's one of the things that I like to do. I like to do that because it saves a lot of texturing time, I'd say. Not just because things also get high res, etc., but I think it's a time saver.
Interesting question, actually. So when I'm doing a mentorship or I'm helping people, like they'll ask sometimes, what's like they're starting out as a student. I'll go do a talk, someone will ask, so what's like the best for environment artist? Like, what's the best thing I could do on materials artist? What's like a really good piece for my portfolio
Mm,
to showcase skills in order to beef up the portfolio? And I'll give them my 2 cents, and like obviously it comes with a caveat of you do something you're interested in first and foremost.
yeah.
But environment art and material art, there's a list of stuff like show these skills. So maybe this type of scene is worth looking at because it shows X, Y, Z.
Mm.
With weapon art, is there like if there's a student saying to you, "Hey, I want to be a weapons artist," what's a good weapon to do as like a portfolio piece to start out of, just to show my skills? Like, is there an answer to that?
I'd say that it's mostly about the art itself, of course, rather than the model of the weapon. But I tried to, in the beginning, to do weapons that others don't. So
Right.
I just found like most weapons that I'm like, oh, I don't see any of these. That's what you won't see. You won't see the AK and all that stuff probably until I think that I'm ready for the AK challenge or whatever. But I'd likely say that pick something where the gun itself is also very interesting. It's a
Yeah.
lot more interesting if you rather than you're gonna apply somewhere and you do an AK and they're like, oh, okay, not the AK, man.
Well, I
But
guess you set yourself up for failure as well with an AK, like because there's so many of them. That
yeah,
it's like, okay,
you,
we're gonna compare you to every
you're gonna
AK that's out there.
compete in the most difficult class there is. Like there's gonna be
Mm.
amazing AKs and there's gonna be shitty AKs. So rather pick something that where the gun itself is interesting. Rather maybe it looks different. It looks interesting. The shapes are very odd or etc. Or perhaps it's just a very rare piece that nobody has ever seen before. Then bam, right there you earn 2 points just because the gun itself is very interesting. People go, oh, this is a cool gun that you made, but you know you've just done an actual weapon, sort of.
Yeah, you sort of caught their eye before they even started
Yeah,
judging your
exactly.
artwork.
So I made the like my revolver that's backwards.
I
Yeah,
love that thing.
yeah, that pistol is just a Nagant revolver. I modeled the actual revolver facing forward. Like the actual revolver
Oh,
is
really?
facing forward. Yeah, I have that file. I kept it. I'm like, I'm gonna save this as a backup, and let's do the reverse one. And I flipped it. I just literally cut it in half, flipped it, and molded it to work mechanically. And I'm like, it's backwards now. And now when you see it, you don't think about that it's an Nagant revolver. You're like, oh shit, that's a reverse revolver. What is that? So
Yeah, because there's also adding the design flair as well. So like coming back to the Spaz 12, you have that strap, you have the sight, you have the shells,
mm,
the fabric tag for the war dog, and
yeah,
these kinds of things. I suppose it's also adding a design flair to it.
mm,
I mean, I don't know why. I'm a sucker for rubber bands. That's one thing I like your scope so much. I love rubber bands.
yeah.
Like they're just I ever since watching T-Rex Arms, the YouTube channel.
Was it one more time?
T-Rex Arms, like something like that. They're the weapons guys. Anyway, they're like
Oh yeah, I know
competitive
her there.
shooters,
Yep,
but
I
they
know her there. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So he was talking through like his favorite M4 setup, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I keep a bit of sticky tape on the barrel, so if I have a laser, I can like strap the laser down."
Mm,
And ever since then, I'm like, "Oh, okay. So how do people actually interact with these weapons?" And like now I see the rubber bands, and I'm like,
mm,
I can imagine from that bit of information, people like oh, my flip cap keeps is broken, so it keeps
yeah,
folding back down. I'll just rubber band it down. Them sort of details now I'm obsessed with. So when I'm looking at weapons, I'm like, how does the person actually handle the gun?
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think that might be why I like your scope so much, because it has the rubber bands, and I'm just in love with that stuff right now. I
yeah.
don't know why.
That's one of the things I'm trying to level up now to get more of let's say realistic sort of details like that, since you're gonna see a lot of people putting on tack lights in front of their weapons, the one
Hmm.
that has a cable going and from the light, and
Yeah,
then it goes down to maybe the grip or the handguard itself, where you have almost like a rectangular rubber piece.
yeah,
Yeah, and that
yeah. I
piece
know the
is
one you're on
actually
about.
where you press with your thumb to activate the light, uh, which is usually a hold or toggle, of course. And then people would put that rubber piece in a really strange spot, and that just, I'm like, I can't click, I can't like that. No, oh, it goes back to where you said that it needs to sort of work for me to dig it.
Yeah, I find when I find out even though I never planned to do weapon art, it was interesting just seeing, because what got me thinking about was it helped actually a lot with my environment art, because it's kind of like it's just the ergonomic use of the gun.
Mm,
So for example, you're coming back to the laser sight.
mm,
It's like, okay, when he was saying when he was competitive shooting,
mm,
um, he didn't like to have. So he kept the laser sight in an awkward place because he didn't want to when you're handling a gun in competitive shooting,
yeah,
you might accidentally click it, or like might get in the way. So he purposely puts it in a place where it's kind of awkward to get to, but still accessible,
yeah,
so that he don't accidentally handle it.
yeah,
And I was like, okay, that's interesting. That is like it's almost reverse psychology. Like, okay, it's not in the most comfortable place; it's in an awkward place, but it's a reason for it.
yeah,
And then it's like that's tied into my environment now. I'm like, okay, how would I navigate this environment? Oh, actually, I don't want this to be completely smooth because then I accidentally do stuff.
mm,
And seeing these little bits of stories, hearing him talk about, and I'm probably on a, actually, I bet you're on a watch list too. Like every weapon artist on the planet is probably on a watch list because they're just googling guns all day.
yeah,
Um,
probably, yeah,
yeah, that like level of logic and thought, actual thought going into it is really interesting. It's actually tied, it's helped me a lot with my work, and I'm not even a weapons artist.
yeah.
Um, and I suppose I'll I mentioned it last week. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate the kill counters on guns?
That's probably a solid 8. Yeah, just etched in marks. Like no sane person would do that. I've seen we have a lot in Sweden. There's a lot of hunting, obviously. People
Mhm.
people think that Sweden is a very non-gunny country, but we actually have like amounts of guns per citizen is insane. Should look that up. It's actually a lot because people hunt so much
Really?
here. Yeah, it's actually a lot. We got a lot of hunting weapons here. We don't like, very few people use ARs for competitive shooting or stuff like that, but there's hunting. rifles, etc. You got a lot of those here. And I've seen you can do a kill count, absolutely, but you have to do it in a different way. You can't have an etched number on the weapon. So if you uh, could you get the SVD in front of you?
SVD.
Yeah, the one you hate.
Yeah.
And then go to the
Oh,
third picture.
the Dragon Nova. Yeah.
Yep, and then you go to the third picture. You got the underside of it, and you see the notches on the grip.
Okay.
That's an actual. That's a common way to do kill counts on a hunting weapon, so to speak. So you would add notches like that, not
Huh.
etch in a number or something like that, because it's you can't do that.
That's scalable.
Yeah, it's just not okay. Can't do that. But
I
this,
mean, also we've spoke about this as well about like the actual context of the weapon. So like a hunting rifle, you expect because it's obviously like let's just say for example you're in like forest or like
mm,
it's gonna have a lot of the scuffs and nastiness and dirt because you're in that area. But then like your L11, it's like you're never taking that into close quarter combat, so
no
it
way.
should actually stay pretty clean. I imagine a lot of sun bleaching because it's obviously like in a static spot for so long.
Mm,
But like it should never really get that scuffed up because they're handled with a lot of care.
yeah,
It's so out of the thick of it that it should never really get buffed up.
yeah,
And that's what I see a lot of, in some weapons when I see people doing is that the wear doesn't make sense. Like even me as someone who doesn't I don't understand weapons. I'm not weapons expert by any stretch, but I look at it and I'm like, well, how's it got that buffed up? Like how have you damaged your gun
yeah,
to the point where you're chipping metal away?
yeah.
Like how does that happen? And that stuff kills me. But I've never noticed that. So, what other ways actually go on? Like, what other like little ways are there like to add that type of story? So you got a notch in on the grip at the bottom of the handguard.
Yeah. Like
Is there other
most
ways?
people, just the notching itself, like people wouldn't um, realize what that is unless you know what it is. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lots of my friends are hunters, and they'd be like, "Oh shit, that's notching right there." Like we know what that is. They're like, "Oh, you've killed 12 deer with that thing." But
Mm.
I mean, for stuff like that, it would be going back to maybe the rubber bands. Things that sort of refers to something that has already happened. So, looking at the rubber bands, maybe some people think that the rubber bands are an AO baking artifact, that those areas around the rubber bands. But it's supposed to refer to that the bands weren't originally in their spot that they are right now, and
Mm-hmm.
like things that get you thinking a little bit more. Such things are sort of what you want on the gun itself. It might be a little difficult to come up with things like that. That
No, I can imagine it though. Like I can imagine like you have two color rubber bands, red and green, and like if you take down mountain lions, that's a red, and if you take down an elk, it's a green. Mm,
uh,
damn, that's
it does require some sort of almost bit of inside that community sort of knowledge.
yeah.
Like you wouldn't know what the hunting notches on the weapon is. It almost looks exact like the people I know that have that on their weapons. They actually they do them so symmetrical. Everything looks so perfect when they do It's actually like an actual just kill counter, but it looks almost as if it's just decoration of the wood itself.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
it's very you can yeah you sort of need to know what the thing is to be able to do it yourself. Sort of it's a bit difficult.
Was that and also people? I think there's a misunderstanding of just how much weapons get taken care of. Like it's your
Yeah.
weapon, and then I'm not even in the communities, but like speaking to yourself and watch documentaries on it. It's like
Mm,
weapons are taken care of. Like this is their weapon. These are expensive pieces of equipment.
yeah.
We're talking civilian right now.
Yep.
You take it apart, you clean it, and even in military, like most
You get a
soldiers like
lot of
every other
shit
day is
from
taking their gun
wearing
apart
on
and
your
cleaning it.
gun.
And I'm like, but then I come back to I see people with like, the gun is literally on the verge of falling apart, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, unless you're going to tell me how that gun ended up that way,
Yeah.
I ain't buying it. Like, there's one which I saw. Is it? Is a pistol and the handguard, the butt of the handguard had almost like a solid. like quarter missing, like dented in. And I was like, I don't care how hard you pistol whip somebody,
Yeah.
you ain't denting that handguard to that degree.
You probably
Um,
won't see any apocalyptic weapons from me either. I'm not. I don't dig that kind of damage either. I go more towards how much detail can you put into as little like big details as possible. Like people go, I want to add a bunch of dirt because it's a detail. I want to add a bunch of dents because it's a detail. I want to add a bunch of this, and like you said, it it just clashes with what it would sort of look like. That's a lot of the differences you see on guns that you think are amazing or guns that you think are, yeah, it's a pretty good gun. They'll usually have very rough strokes, so to speak. But
I
the
think
ones
you're.
that really catches your idea, like, oh, that's a fine gun right there, and then you're gonna see all these subtle details, but it's in pretty good condition, etc.
Well, this is. I will say, anyone who is interested in seeing how to do like not dirty, just and not factory do, like just exists, like
Hmm.
level of detail. That L11 man, like because it isn't dirty, and it like because
Wait, who?
there's information. Your the one you did the side bit, the L11,
Oh, right, yeah.
like it's people think dirty and they're like, okay, there's actually got to be physical bits of dirt on there, but
Yeah,
like people look at that and they probably think, oh, that's just a clean sniper, but there's information in there,
yeah,
and that's why I think it's so believable because it has like even a factory new sniper
yeah.
has information in the polymer in the metal. Um,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Anyone who's I know this is a podcast, so obviously people can't see this. Just go. I'll link Linus's our station. This is probably the best example of this that I have seen, and this is me just gushing because he's on here right now. Anyone who knows me, or I've spoken about this in the past, knows I'm a big fan of this weapon. Um, but it's the like subtle details, and like it's the sort of thing where if you blur your eyes, you don't see anything. Like it just fades. You don't notice anything. It's when you actually look at the weapon up close, you're like, oh, there's little dents, there's little discolorations or roughness variations.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
that
I
is what
love this
I'm
stuff.
sort of digging right now. The modern materials and how to get them as nice as possible without adding a bunch of extra, like probably a lot of people add, like you said, dirt, and they do cavities and then they do dirt, and there's like mud stuck in a cavity, and you're like, why is there mud? nobody
Yeah,
Nobody's
no one
saying
rubs their gun in the
don't
mud.
have mud on their weapon. Like, that's a big no. The weapon.
Yeah, because these weapons are actually like super. There's like high fidelity, like a tiny like this sort of stuff gets into the receiver or like the chamber, and like, that's it. Your gun's misfiring or it's not firing
Yeah,
at all. Like these things are high fidelity weapons.
yeah. And the gun that I'm doing now, the one, you know which one it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That one, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna bring it up and I'm gonna see all the details, and so that's a personal weapon of mine that I'm replicating, and that weapon, like, I'm like, oh, there's nothing to take from it. You can't take any like little scratches or whatever, because a same person takes so good care of the gun, like it doesn't get anywhere to get that dirty. So you have to get sort of the details that, how to say it, the details that sort of aren't there, that you won't really see them unless they're not there. It's gonna look a lot like you just paint bucket uh paint bucketed the whole thing with just
Mm.
colors, like bam bam bam, unless you get all the little tiny details in there. A lot like some Tarkov weapons would, they don't have mud, they don't have big dents, they don't have nothing like that. It's just the definitioning of the material itself, the tiny details. Those, if those are, you get those on point, then you got a huge head start. Like, you don't need to add mud in the cavities and big obvious
Mm.
things. You don't need those.
Dude, you've actually you've segued this perfectly. So we've been going off, and I said to me, wait, that's how quick we managed to get through these. Like, so we've been talking for an hour now, and since you haven't listened to last week's, you don't know this question is coming, but I throw the curveball at every guest.
Mm.
in a year's time, I used to ask, what would you say to yourself when you're, just getting into the industry? What advice would you give yourself? I've changed my mindset. I don't really like looking backwards. I want to look forwards.
Mm,
In a year's time, where do you want to be as an artist? What do you want to have accomplished, or like, what are you hoping to develop? Because you've mentioned this current gun you're working on.
mm.
Is there anything in your head that you're like, okay, I'm really focusing on this thing, so that to develop on? What is it you want to develop in the next year?
So what I want to do is I just want to focus on the art, really. Just the art of it, the texturing and the modeling. That's of course what I want to do. But there are of course also other things that you need to do, the unwrapping and all that stuff. But the things I really want to just go for is that when I joined the studio, I realized there are so many other things that you have to deal with. Uh, I thought that Dice was the perfect fit for me. I'm like, oh, Dice do Battlefield, and Battlefield has almost been one of my three favorite games. And I just, this is perfect. So when I get there, oh, it's good, of course, and the studio people are always amazing. Everybody is always so friendly. It's really nice. But the work the work from working on a studio is not for me. It ends up that the actual percentage of art that you get to do is not as much as people think it is. You have to do so much other stuff. A lot of
Mm.
it of your time is going to be eaten up by outsourcing, things like that, things that you didn't really expect that you would be doing. So I decided to go freelance instead, and I now mostly freelance the weapon um, 1P version, so the one that you're gonna be seeing in first person. That model is of course different from the one that you see in third person, and that the model that's made in third person is usually not made by me. So just the
Yeah,
weapon in its full potential in its first person view and all that is what I want to do. Just focus on the art itself, do as good as I can, and then see the game, see the weapon in a game. That's of course the big payoff. Uh, but just to really get away from all the as much other things as possible.
nice man. That's fair. And well, respect for being that honest as well. Because I think having that confidence to want to be that guy doing that stuff, that's actually pretty admirable.
Mm.
Um, but dude, I know you're a busy dude, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and
Yep.
next week we will have Doru on, so that would like finish the trio with the props artist from
So how long
War
have we
Dog.
done this?
We've been going now for an hour.
Oh, okay, okay. I was thinking
That's what I mean.
solid
It goes
30
quick,
minutes.
man.
Something a solid 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, we every time people come on, they're like, "Oh shit, I thought we were only talking for like 20 minutes." It's like, yeah, look at the counter, bro. Like, I was
Yeah.
gone. Um, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone who's listening, remember the podcast is available on Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Cast, and iTunes and YouTube. If you enjoyed the podcast, obviously we have a Patreon. Please, go support it. Anything that goes to the Patreon goes back into the podcast to make it better. Yeah, Linus, dude, it's been a real pleasure talking to you,
Yep.
man. I've really
Awesome.
enjoyed it.
Thank you for inviting me.
See you next week, guys.